Hello guys, today I'm ranking the backstories of the Ninjago villains. So backstories kind of help to shape the character, and it usually shares how the character became a villain, how they were brought up, etc. So and also please note, Pythor is not on this list as he doesn't have an individual backstory. This will probably be the only ranking where somebody isn't on it, but anyway. Nadakhan is at the bottom of this list, and this is mainly due to the fact that he has a very vague backstory, in the sense that it only explains how he was captured and how he was imprisoned in the Teapot of Tyran. It doesn't really explain how he came to Ninjago or anything else. Now, I think this is mainly because Captain Soda was the one who was telling the backstory, but if they'd had Nadakhan telling his own backstory or something, it might have made for a much more interesting backstory, which shared how he came to Ninjago and shared more about his character. Overall, his backstory just feels really inadequate. Chen is number 7 on this list, and this is mainly due to the fact that his backstory isn't really his backstory. He's just included in a part of Garmadon's backstory, essentially. However, it does provide some details to his actual character, and it basically shares that he was once a sensei, actually, and he was actually the one who did start the Serpentine War by manipulating both sides, making them both paranoid. So, anyway, when the Serpentine War was finished and they found out it was Chen, they did punish him. Now, also, his backstory is a lot like Nadakhan's, except a little better, because it has more going on to it, and it adds more character development to him. Like, for instance, the whole thing about stealing Wu's letter definitely provides character development for him. However, there's a lot missing from this backstory, and it would have been nice to see if he had his own backstory instead of, like, let's say what actually happened was Garmadon's backstory, but it did provide details to Chen's background. But it would have been nicer if we saw where Chen came from and other scenes and stuff. Hands of Time are in the number 6 spot on this list. I like their backstory definitely more than the other two that I've talked about so far. And it's mainly because it is very complete, essentially. So, I love that they were actually good guys who did turn bad, but I would have liked to see them fighting as good guys more. However, that may not have been necessarily relevant to the story of Season 7, but their backstory is interesting enough. It was very fun to see when they were fighting the Elemental Masters and Rei and Maya. I also love the scenes where Crux did kidnap Rei and Maya. Now, essentially, this is the backstory. This is where the backstories get a lot better from the other two. The other two are just, like, really bad. This backstory is definitely better. However, it's not amazing because it's a much shorter backstory. And as we all know by this point, I absolutely hate the motives of the Time Twins. So this backstory definitely really captures that a lot. But that's really all I have to say for this. Overlord takes the number 5th spot. I like his backstory a lot, and one of the better things I love, and I'm talking visually, is I love the animation of his backstory. The art is very different from the other backstory art we've seen, and it's kind of nostalgic. It's the kind of art they used for flashbacks and backstories in the pilots in Season 1 and Season 2. But anyway, yeah, I like the Overlord's backstory because I love how they portrayed the Overlord as this kind of dark spirit who came out of nowhere, and I love the animation also. The whole concept is very cool, but it reminds me a lot of Garmadon, and it's not exactly the most original backstory ever. It's a lot like Garmadon in the sense that both villains manipulated weaker villains, Overlord manipulating Garmadon, Garmadon manipulating Samakai. Both were banished by their kind of counterpart. Garmadon's counterpart is Wu, Overlord's counterpart is the first Ninjitsu master, and they were both banished to secret places, Overlord going to the Dark Island, Garmadon going to the Underworld, of course. And yes, the Overlord's backstory was introduced later than Garmadon, so that makes the less original of the two, but I still do like this backstory, because Garmadon's is a lot more complex than his, and this backstory is only kind of copying one aspect of Garmadon's very long backstory. Yank might be the least favorite Ninjago villain of many fans, but I do like his backstory, actually. Basically, he was this guy who wanted to master all of the martial arts, Ninjitsu, Feng Kwando, you name it, and he aspired to be great. and his name even meant good, but as he even directly quotes in Day of the Departed, he always aspired to be great. And he did this by creating his own martial art, air jitsu. So I like this, this is the first part of his backstory, because it's kind of unique and very different from other villains. Other villains often lose something, but in this case, it was not very different in Sensei Yang's case. Now, he did try to achieve immortality, but why did he do this? He wanted to go down in history as the greatest man ever to live, okay? But basically it went wrong and he was turned into a ghost. So I like this backstory because it's very original, and it's also quite different when we're talking about Ninjago villains. Like I've said, normally most villains end up losing something. This is definitely very true of Harumi and Morro, but I feel like this backstory is definitely very unique. However, there are some better backstories. I love Harumi's backstory because of the emotional tone that it sets. So, as we know by now, her parents were killed by the Great Devourer, and even in this scene right here, this photo right here that I'm displaying, it's when the paramedics ask her what her name is, and you can see, like, how heartbroken she looks. She's just stunned, right? So I love the emotional appeal of this backstory. It makes you feel really sorry for the character of Harumi. And I like how it also sorts out that not everybody survived the Great Devourer attack. That's definitely very realistic. Definitely. But yeah, I like this. It's one of the more simpler backstories. And I feel like it is very emotional when we talk about this. It's not as long as some other backstories, but it is actually told from Harumi's point of view in the form of a flashback. There are only a few greater backstories, and that's what I'm going to get into next. Morro's backstory is amazing to me. It's like Harumi's, but even better. Here I was a second ago thinking that Harumi's was pretty good, but actually Morro's is Harumi's backstory enhanced by a lot. For one, it's a lot longer than Harumi's backstory, and it's also more emotional too, and it provides a lot more character development to the character of Morro. I mean, heck, it was even the episode with his backstory was even named just because of this backstory. Ghost Story, episode 46. But basically, he wanted to be the Green Ninja, and the golden weapons didn't react to him, so he ran away and sought to prove himself, but ended up dying in the process. This itself is a very unique idea itself, and I love this idea. It just sounds really cool. This backstory does an amazing job of characterizing him as a young boy who was consumed by anger, consumed by greed and desire, who's consumed by want, I love this backstory. I also love how he tries to prove himself after the golden weapons fail to react to him, and it kind of shows that he is determined. He's very determined, and he'll do anything to prove himself. He'll do anything to get what he wants, and this character, that aspect of him is developed further in Possession, especially in the later episodes of the season where he does release the Preeminent and such. However, there's one greater backstory. Garmadon's backstory is my favorite backstory of any Ninjago villain, and I'm going to explain why. For one, it's the longest backstory ever, and it's actually explained in multiple seasons. And I'm going to explain every season that kind of adds on to his backstory. The pilots, season one was his initial, real flashback story, and that's the picture here. And also, season 4 and season 7 also kind of clarifies backstory. But the pilots and those little mini-movies they released with the pilots. So, yeah, I mean, the fact that his backstory is being spread over multiple seasons, it automatically makes it the longest backstory of any Ninjago villain ever. So, and it's more than that, too, because his backstory is also, it shows how he changes, too, from a good guy to a bad guy. His backstory shows that, too, especially the first part of his backstory, in which he's battling Wu, the katana flies over the wall. He's very innocent then, and he tells Wu, never put off till tomorrow what can be done today. But then, the next part we see of his backstory is when he does go off to trade with Chen, and he actually ends up signing that letter that was Wu's letter. So that definitely shows character development too. It illustrates his change. Then, of course, we do see him in the Serpentine War and the fighting off the Hands of Time. It shows him as very brave, and he'll do a lot to fight for his friends and family. And then, of course, the last big part of his backstory is where he battles Wu, which shows that his transformation is fully complete. And then it's also cool to see him battle Samakai afterwards. That's going to conclude this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed, leave a like, subscribe, share it with anyone and everyone you know, and I will see you next time.